Everywhere you look, the rich history of the United Kingdom is there to be seen. But hidden beneath our feet, there's still a wealth of archaeological treasure just waiting to be found. That's why each year, up and down the country, our archaeologists dig down, searching for fresh discoveries.
Another one.
Revealing the imprint of ancient civilizations.
Yeah. So we are looking at a completely unknown Roman town.
That's crazy. Wow. And unearthing priceless objects.
Might be a pendant.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
This is something special, isn't it?
Yeah, I've not seen anything like it so far.
Every dig adds new pieces to the ever-growing archaeological jigsaw.
Gotta come and have a look.
That is the epic story of our islands. It's been an extraordinary year full of challenges, and yet I've been able to visit so many exciting digs up and down the country.
Oh my goodness.
There have been spine-tingling discoveries to witness.
That is the face of a Trojan.
Yes.
My heart is racing.
And I'm even getting a chance to use a trowel myself. I'm joined by a trio of expert investigators.
I can actually see the texture of the weave, and it's, what, 1,600 years old?
It's amazing that a small DNA sample like this can tell that really quite big story.
As they dig deeper for answers.
Same technique as the Romans used.
Exactly.
Finally, the archaeologists bring their best finds into the studio.
Splash away. You can see that this object has had a life of its own.
For up-close analysis.
It's astonishing detail.
Welcome to Digging for Britain. This time we take a look at the latest archaeological finds from the south of the UK. Under a Norman church, spectacular evidence of the demise of Roman Britain is uncovered.
It's being kind of almost violently destroyed, I think.
Certainly the cremation urns have been thrown into that ditch with no care.
Do you think? A Bronze Age settlement has got archaeologists stumped.
I'm convinced we've got a roundhouse here. It's just a bit confusing at the moment.
And I get my hands on some genuine old money.
So these are among some of the first coins made in Britain.
Wow. With its coastline facing an often turbulent European continent, the south of England has been the starting point for several hostile takeovers. Perhaps the most successful started in 1066. The sudden arrival of the Normans would kickstart a new epoch in the history of our islands. Today, I'm visiting a parish that stood slap bang in the way of William the Conqueror's rolling conquest, Stoke Mandeville. As they settled, the Normans built new churches all over England, with communities growing up around them. But that's not what happened here. In this gentle valley just south of Stoke Mandeville is this isolated church surrounded by fields, and nobody knows why it was built here. Built around 1080, the Church of St Mary's was strangely located in this damp, isolated spot, half a mile from the village. When, in the 19th century, Stoke Mandeville got a more convenient new church, the old Norman church soon became neglected, fell into ruin, and was eventually demolished. Now, the new high-speed rail line HS2 needs to pass through the ruin of Old St Mary's, so under cover of this vast tent, a team of archaeologists is excavating thousands of graves and preserving any historic artefacts. It's also a fantastic opportunity to solve the centuries-long mystery of why the church was built here. Lead archaeologist Rachel Wood hopes to find an answer. Rachel, so this is it? This is the mysterious Church of St Mary's, then?
It is, yes. And what you can actually see is the very bottom of the foundations.
There's something really curious about it, though, isn't there? That it's just out here in the countryside. It seems to be some way away from any settlement.
That was definitely one of our questions that we're trying to answer. Why is there a church essentially in the middle of an unoccupied field?
Right, because I think the most obvious answer would have been that actually it was part of a medieval village or a medieval town.
Yes, and it would have been serving that settlement, but our works have proven that that is not the case, so the mystery is continuing.
In the surrounding area, Rachel's team have uncovered evidence of earlier Bronze Age, Iron Age, and even Roman activity. But what of the centuries that followed?
We don't have any evidence for any Saxon activity in this landscape at all at the minute.
That's really strange.
There's a distinct gap, yeah.
So you've got Iron Age Roman activity, and then you've got a gap of 600 years.
Something like that,
And then suddenly the Normans decide to build this church here.
Yes, so there must have been a reason. We're hoping to find some evidence of some earlier activity once we get underneath the church foundations.
So there's a real mystery here to solve then, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Why do you have a church suddenly appearing in this space in the landscape in the 11th century?
The answer to this mystery could lie somewhere beneath these foundations. As part of the excavation, the skeletons from the churchyard need to be carefully removed and they'll be reinterred. The team's been recording their fascinating finds from the graves using our Dig Diary cameras.
We've got an adult male and at his feet a china plate, which is an interesting find because they're known as salt plates, placed in with the individual as a sign of purity, as a sign of eternal life.
A plate of salt at the feet was intended to offer protection in the afterlife, to ward off the devil. Underneath the superstitious Victorians are graves from the flamboyant Georgian era. Though even the fanciest wooden coffins have often completely rotted away.
That's Ruth Jackson, and you can see just in the side of the grave there some gold-plated coffin studs.
Oh yes, I can see those standing out there. So they're still shining and gold, because gold doesn't tarnish.
Yes.
So she must have been quite wealthy to have gold on her coffin.
Yes, so the Jacksons are one of the prominent families, and she died at the ripe old age of 90.
Wow.
In 1727.
How do you know her name?
So as we removed the original rubble mound covering the church, her gravestone was actually still in place and intact and kind of emerged out of the rubble. We had no idea it was there.
So, I mean, graves that have been completely forgotten about, and you're uncovering them again and telling these stories.
I really think that's one of the best things we can do for the burial population here at St Mary's, is to remember them.
Gravestones make the archaeologists' detective work a lot simpler. Other objects take a little more work to decipher.
This is a bone object. It's turned, and it was found next to a gentleman's head, roughly the same period as Ruth Jackson, so roughly the 1700s.
Oh, what on earth is that?
We have a theory. The theory is you would put a piece of cloth with a dab of your blood on it and some honey in it, and you would put it in your Georgian's men's wig.
Oh.
And all of the fleas running around in the wig would be attracted by the blood on the cloth and then get stuck in the honey in the pot.
It's a flea catcher, a flea trap.
A flea catcher, yeah.
I've never heard of such a thing. That's just bizarre.
It's very bizarre.
There's some residue inside it, so you might even be able to test that and find out what it is.
Hopefully, yes.
So far, St Mary's is giving up fascinating secrets from the Georgian and Victorian eras, but the big mystery of why the Normans chose to build their church here, so far from the village, remains. The deeper the team dig, the closer they may be getting to the answer.
Are you almost down to the bottom of the foundations then?
Absolutely, yeah. We are nearly at the bottom of the stone walls, and it's as we get beneath those that we're hoping to find out whether or not there was anything else under the Norman church.
I bet you're itching for the day when you can start to excavate down here.
Absolutely.
Nearby, the team has been storing stonework from the ruin for further analysis and reuse in a new memorial. But something here catches my eye.
Now, this piece of stone really leapt out at me. It's a different sort of stone. So this is not the same stone as most of that Norman church is made of. Could it be part of an Anglo-Saxon church that predates the Norman church? Could it be even earlier? Could it be Roman? And I think as this dig progresses, we might get to the bottom of it. But it represents the whole mystery of St Mary's in microcosm.
My drawing is put on hold as while we're on site, there's breaking news from the dig tent.
So there's been all this speculation about whether there's an earlier phase here at St Mary's, and I think some really exciting evidence has just emerged.
Archaeologist Shirley Mihailova has made the discovery.
Shirley, what have you found? What have you found?
I have found a very interesting coin. It's a long cross silver penny.
So do you know when it dates to?
It potentially dates from 978 to 1016 AD because it has the head of Ethelred II on it.
Ethelred II, that's Ethelred the Unready?
Yes.
I mean, this was an Anglo-Saxon king.
Yes.
This must be the first bit of evidence that you've had which definitely predates the Norman period.
Yes.
This is just fantastic. The late 10th, early 11th century, before the Norman church. Do you think this coin is associated with this burial?
It does make sense with the location, it being around the pelvic area, so potentially from a pocket. So I do believe that it was with the individual.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. I just can't believe that's just come out of the ground.
Yeah, it's
while I'm
absolutely
here.
amazing.
I'm so excited.
This coin is a really enticing find for the dig team. At last, St Mary's Church is hinting at a past that predates any Norman structure. Having been left on tenterhooks about what else the team might find, archaeologists Rachel Wood and Guy Hunt have come to the Digging for Britain tent to give me an update.
So Rachel and Guy, if we look at the photograph from site, is that the
That's
Norman
right.
church foundations?
Yeah, so you can see the Norman foundations really clearly there in white. And you can see a big circular dark ditch coming around, just around here.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite dark. And then the more exciting part is that you can see the foundations of a small structure.
Yeah.
And because it's sealed by the foundations for the Norman church, we know that it predates the Norman period, and it's very exciting because it is actually Saxon.
Guy's beautiful 3D model of the burial site has every grave etched in. Now he can add the newly discovered pre-Norman ditch and a Saxon building.
We think it's actually the base of a kind of tower. So we know that in the later part of the Saxon period, there's a tradition for building these towers. So there are 30 or 40 of these known, either from excavation or still surviving in England.
So this is a tower without a church?
That's right. We think it would have just been a tower.
So you're talking about something that could be used as a watchtower. It could also be used as a bell tower. It could be used as a private chapel. It's a kind of an essential part of this lordly kit, the stuff that you need in order to be considered as an aristocrat in that late Saxon period. When the land changes and it becomes owned by the Bishop of Lincoln, they basically demolish the tower, get rid of it, and they build their Norman chapel right on top of it like that.
Yeah, and it's disappeared. I mean, that mark of Anglo-Saxon power has been eradicated from the landscape as well.
It's a really strong and powerful statement of this kind of transition of power that happens between one set of aristocrats and another.
Yeah. So, Rachel, what's underneath the Saxon tower?
Well, we're keeping our fingers crossed for perhaps an even earlier building. We would love to find, evidence for something like a Roman temple, but whether or not something like that was there in the first place and then has survived the construction of a tower and then the Norman church and then 800 years worth of burials it's quite a slim chance, really.
You've got a few more weeks left on site. This story's not quite finished yet.
We're nearly there.
Little did we know then, but another, even older layer of archaeology underneath St Mary's was just weeks away from being discovered. Luckily, our cameras were there to capture the excitement, and later in the programme I get to take a very close look at what could be some of the most important Roman artefacts ever found in Britain.
Yeah, I think it's definitely quit now, retire now.
We'll retire
because-
now, that's
because
it.
you
It's
could
never going to
spend-
be as good.
We dig for the gods that leave no bones, for ships sail the sunken sea.
When you've got buildings made of stone, they're relatively easy to interpret, especially when they're upstanding like this fantastic Norman keep. But for much of prehistory, our ancestors were making and living in buildings which were made of wood, thatch, clay, turf, materials that either disappear completely from the archaeological record or leave only the faintest of traces. And then we've got the challenge of working out what materials a house may have been made of in its entirety and what it would have looked like, as we see in our next story.
We move to that goldmine of archaeological opportunity, the Ministry of Defence's training area on Salisbury Plain. The plain's 300-mile square chalk plateau is a wonderful setting for the undisputed heavyweight champion of Britain's prehistoric monuments. Thought to have originated around 5,000 years ago, awe-inspiring Stonehenge is actually just one of many mysterious traces of ancient cultures that can be seen across this atmospheric landscape. But a lot here remains out of sight, just a few feet below the surface. The results from a ground-penetrating radar survey have led MOD archaeologist Richard Osgood to suspect that a Bronze Age settlement once stood on this patch of exercise ground known as Dunch Hill.
We know on the track that we've got over there were 4 houses found in 1995, dating to the late Bronze Age, and I want to see if that settlement that we know about from that track extends further.
With a team of volunteer ex-servicemen, Richard's been looking for evidence of a typical Bronze Age dwelling, the roundhouse.
That's a nice one.
The team's been recording their search with our Dig Diary cameras.
We've just stripped off the top area with a machine, and the really good things for us are these small, dark splodges cut into the chalk. We're pretty hopeful are going to be post holes, and if we're looking for roundhouses from the late Bronze Age, then this is the sort of thing we're looking for. These are the remnants of posts that hold up the roof.
3,000 years ago, during the Bronze Age, the population of Britain is thought to have numbered in the tens of thousands. Many people would have lived in large roundhouses, much like this recreation. Thick wooden posts form the circular structure that supports the walls and a thatched roof. At Dunch Hill, as with most roundhouse sites, the materials used to build the walls and the roof have degraded over time.
And you can sort of see the post holes sort of go to there and then they sort of angle up a bit. There's another one.
All Richard's team have to work with are what appear to be the holes that once held wooden posts.
Yeah, definitely promising.
Yeah.
When they excavate the holes, they soon find something else often used in Bronze Age building foundations.
That is deep with the flint packing all around it. They're packed with flint, and that would have kept the big timber uprights in place. So you've got a really nice settlement potential coming out here.
The post holes also offer up more clues to suggest Richard's onto something.
So I've got a nice bit of pot. Yeah, there we go. Wow, that's a nice chunk, isn't it?
These are likely to be fragments of Bronze Age pottery used by the villagers who lived here.
This is quite a nice piece there. You can see some decoration.
Great, so that's another post holes producing ceramics.
But the next discovery is indisputable evidence.
Found the best find of the dig so far, which is this late Bronze Age pin.
Oh my goodness, let's look at that. That's perfect for the dating of this site, isn't it? Isn't that lovely? What I love about this is that this is a sort of pin that will have hold bits of clothing together, like a cloak or something like that. But that directly leads us to the farmers of Dunch Hill in the Bronze Age.
It's a startling find for Chris, a volunteer army veteran.
How did you feel when you found that?
Oh, I was the happiest man in the world.
Despite the Bronze Age finds, Richard is still struggling to identify the outline of an actual roundhouse.
It's a bit confusing at the moment. It looks a bit like a Swiss cheese. There's holes everywhere. I'm convinced we've got a roundhouse here. It's just finding that shape, and at the moment it's not especially clear.
Because the walls have completely disappeared, what they were actually made of is also puzzling. Fortunately, work on solving both those mysteries is underway. To find out more, Stuart Pryor, a specialist in landscape archaeology, is visiting Butser Farm in Hampshire, where they recreate ancient buildings.
This is actually the sum total of the archaeology.
I've come to meet Butser's experimental building expert, Trevor Creighton. OK, so, Trevor, there was no evidence for walling, though, was there?
No, absolutely none at Dunch Hill, and that's what makes this building so interesting. What we see here is a plan of the complete excavation. All we have is this ring of posts.
Trevor's knowledge of other roundhouse structures helps him identify a telltale pattern in the Dunch Hill post plan.
So we were able to deduce that what we've got here is a series of post holes arranged around a fairly irregular circle, but that's our roundhouse.
Ready? Here we go.
Having figured out the layout, Trevor assembled a team of volunteers to recreate the roundhouse at Dunch Hill. From digging the post holes, then driving the posts into the ground, to mounting the lintels.
Look at that. That's a top trilithon.
Up to this point, the structure was largely based on strong archaeological evidence. Now, to build the walls. One of the problems is that we're not sure what this particular roundhouse was built from.
And that's exactly the point of the experiment. They must have made it from materials that just dissolved, and we're going to make walls that are made of local materials that are just so ephemeral that they're going to disappear over 3 millennia.
So it's truly archaeology by experiment?
It's truly experimental archaeology.
Trevor's version of the Dunch Hill house has become a laboratory for Bronze Age wall building.
This is the Dunch Hill house. This is the attempted reconstruction. We've put each of these post holes where the original post holes were in the archaeology.
Trevor's team have been experimenting with different types of materials to construct the surrounding walls. Without physical evidence, it's the best way to work out which method could have been used by the Bronze Age builders at Dunch Hill.
Over here, we've got a turf wall.
OK, that's unusual to have in association with a roundhouse.
Yeah, it is very unusual. We're using available materials, and one of the materials that was available was turf. This turf here actually comes from the clearance of this roundhouse, so it's very plausible that that's the sort of material people would use.
I suppose over time this earth wall would have just weathered away.
Yeah.
So all you're left with are the post holes in the ground.
Yes. What we're trying to do is create these suggestions of what might be and test those assumptions.
Another structure wall has been built using bog-standard topsoil. Then in the final section, they're using Salisbury Plain's most iconic naturally occurring substance, chalk. So you've crushed the chalk, which I can see in the barrow here. What's the next stage then?
Very simple. We just take this material, get a handful of it. It's sort of lumpy and goopy.
It is,
isn't it? We just put it on our wall.
Just anywhere?
Yeah. It's not unlike a primitive concrete in that way.
I'm amazed at how solid that is, you know? It's just a pile of mush, really, but it's actually turned into a solid wall, which is really impressive.
Yeah.
Like the turf and soil Trevor's experimenting with, the chalk could also disappear over time.
If these walls dissolve and fail, that's an excellent result for us, because then all we're left with are the posts.
We've got to wait 2,000 years for that to happen.
Well, I hope. More than 1 year would be good.
Yeah. Only time will yield results from Trevor's Bronze Age building experiment. Perhaps in the future, this will shed more light on how the roundhouse at Dunch Hill was actually made. But today, by building up instead of digging down, I've had an insight into an alternative approach to archaeology. Seeing the different construction methods experimented with has been really interesting today, and actually a fascinating way to go about undertaking your archaeology by experiment. Despite the fact that at Dunch Hill there doesn't seem to be much surviving apart from a few post holes, if this is a Bronze Age house, it could have been quite a remarkable feat of engineering.
We now journey back to Roman Britain and a dig which spans almost 4 centuries of occupation. I'm heading for a place that was key to trade and travel across the south, Silchester, 10 miles south of modern-day Reading. Though originally an Iron Age settlement, it's the infrastructure created by the Romans that's now a treasure trove for archaeologists.
This huge wall still encircles the massive 40-hectare site.
Silchester boasts many of the usual features typical of a Roman town, including an amphitheatre and, most importantly, of course, a bathhouse complex. And it's these buildings that are perhaps the best window into Silchester's past.
It's also one of the longest-running archaeological digs in the country.
We've visited here before, back in 2014, with the team from the University of Reading.
It looks like we found what we were hoping for from this excavation, and that is a Nero-stamped tile.
That ceramic tile meant these baths dated to the reign of Emperor Nero between 54 and 68 AD, proving that these were some of the earliest buildings here. Now the team's opened up a whole new section, revealing fresh layers and finds that could tell a complex story, one that mirrors the rise and fall of the Roman Empire in Britain.
Mike, how long have you been digging at Silchester?
A long time.
Mike Fulford is the project director.
Have you just opened this year then?
Yes, just in the last 4 weeks.
When does most of what we're looking at here date to then?
2nd and 3rd century, most of it. But there's material that's definitely later, and there's material that relates to Nero's time. Bathhouses are complicated, but I never really envisaged there was so much going on with this bathhouse.
Mike's been digging here for more than 4 decades, but it was antiquarians from the early 1900s who first excavated the baths. Those diggers eagerly ripped through centuries of precious archaeology, then simply reburied it. However, they missed more than they found. So Mike's team has been meticulously working their way through this archaeological backfill, and with our dig diary cameras, they recorded what they found.
I found this hairpin. It's made of bone, which I think is pretty cool.
This looks to me like a little hook. It's clearly made of bronze or copper alloy.
The antiquarians also missed the biggest story of all, how the expansion and contraction of these baths mirrored the ups and downs of the Roman Empire during almost 4 centuries of rule in Britain.
What are you learning this time around that the antiquarians didn't understand?
Above all, they didn't appreciate that there were certainly 2 successive separate bathhouses. First one completely demolished, and now, possibly, we have evidence of a major extension of the second, which you might call a 3rd bathhouse. We can see a much richer story of how this bathhouse developed through the whole Roman period.
It's down at the bottom of the dig where the bath's transition through time can be best seen. This is the first Silchester bathhouse, built during the reign of Emperor Nero. Mike's team uncovers telltale materials from this first phase.
We've got some green sand, which is the foundations for this, which is also inside that wall over there.
Yeah.
Which is a hallmark sign of the Neronian stuff of the site.
When you look down, you can see, first of all, the cross wall of the first baths.
When does that date to?
That dates to the 50s, 60s of the 1st century. So,
oh, really early?
Yeah, soon after the conquest.
By this point, Silchester's population had boomed to many thousands, so the first bathhouse is knocked down to make way for a larger, grander second bathhouse.
So it's getting bigger?
It's getting bigger. So then we have another major change to the baths with a really huge extension, and they're still not content because they build this apse.
So this is a lovely curved wall.
Isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Perhaps contained a cold pool, maybe statues, a really distinctive feature of the baths.
Evidence of luxurious finishes were discovered by Mike's team when they found traces of decorative walls.
It's a little piece of painted plaster. I suspect it probably came from the inside originally, but I think that's a stripe being painted on. Fantastic.
You can see that we've got this fantastic Opus Signum render, which is stuck on the outside of the apse itself. It looks like it's been re-rendered several times.
This is the bathhouse at its peak in the 3rd century AD.
So we've got a story of expansion, getting bigger. It's partly a response, I think, to maybe changing population of the town. Also, perhaps expansion to give opportunities for men and women to bathe separately. You can see how this building would have developed and changed over time.
What is this excitement I just heard?
The dig team has found jewellery lost by bathers.
Just in this finds tray, found a fragment of a brooch of some sort, and it's copper alloy, and it's the part where the pin would go when you close it.
Evidence of fine dining.
Yeah, it's a lovely bowl.
But yeah, so it's a really nice like rope patterning, feathering.
Quite a lot of bone.
A big jaw of a cattle or something there.
Something. Still quite interesting.
After the bathhouses boom, in the 4th century, it starts to contract. The Roman Empire is in decline, and Silchester's population is shrinking. Mike has found evidence that the building's structure reflects that.
The bath begins to break into smaller units. That wall is taken down and a new wall built on a destroyed foundation.
Yeah.
And you're beginning to get a kind of reduction. The quality of the work, not so good, but it continued to give them that pleasure of having heat and warmth and bathing facility, which they'd enjoyed for 400 years.
Here at Silchester, Mike's been able to map the ups and downs of Roman power in Britain, but the dig also tells a more local story.
Talking to Mike, I've come to realise that I think my view of Roman baths was completely awry, and it all being about bathing. But if we look at the plan of the whole building from Mike's excavations, we can see that this is the complex when it was at its largest and most complicated. You come in here, so the entrance is up this end, which is where the hedge is, and you come into this courtyard area, which is called a palaestra. It's like an exercise yard, and then you have your series of baths going from frigidarium through to hotter baths. That's our one that we're looking at there in the trench, just this section of that whole complex. But looking at the function of this place, I'm starting to think of it a lot more as a leisure centre. This is the gym at the heart of Roman Silchester.
This bath complex must have been a hub of activity, and the Reading team continued to unearth evidence that tells us more about what went on there. So I asked Mike to come along to the Digging for Britain tent with a collection of the best finds from this year's dig.
It's fantastic to
It's a
see
pleasure.
these. Yeah.
Yes.
What do they tell us then about the
Well,
bathhouse?
there's sort of aspects of life and how the baths were used. So we've got a dye.
And this is bone.
Yes. It looks like just any dice you could buy today. Look
Isn't
at
it
it.
lovely?
It's in-
Alongside that, these are all gaming pieces, are they?
Yes, so that's another bone counter. This one where they've just taken the base of a small beaker and just cut it out to create the shape.
So it would have been a very sociable space to be in.
Oh, very much so, yes. It probably was the social centre of the town.
Yeah.
One of the most exciting finds we've got is this bronze belt fitting and buckle.
It's lovely. What would it have been part of?
An officer, military or high-ranking civil servant, part of their uniform. It's quite thin and fine, so it's unlikely to be going around the waist, but perhaps more of a strap that's
Right.
going across the chest, something like that.
Yeah. And then
Yes.
the tongue has
Yes.
almost got the head of a little beast at the end of it.
Yes, right from the turn of the 4th and 5th century.
Yeah. So it suggests that we have Roman officials there right towards the end of the Roman period.
Yes, yes, and enjoying the baths such as they were then.
Yeah. Mike, when I visited you on site, you had quite a few more weeks left of the dig. So what else did you find? I think this is from the very end, isn't it?
This is from the very end, yes. A really important discovery. So this is a massive oak beam which is underpinning this substantial brick extension of the bathhouse, which we think is 2nd century. But the beauty about the find of these timbers is that they have the potential to give us a dendrochronological date. So this is a tremendous bonus.
And it's brilliant, isn't it, tree ring dating? Because with dendrochronology, you get the year that that tree was felled.
Absolutely, a year, and so you could associate that with a particular emperor, a particular governor of Britain. You can sort of fit it in to some of the people of Roman Britain that we know of.
And with this fantastic preservation that you now know exists on site, do you think you're going to be going back? I mean, you've been at Silchester a long time, Mike, I think from the 70s.
I mean, there's so much that one can learn by re-examining this build, the structure, seeing the things which they didn't really cotton on to at the beginning of the 20th century. So it really would be worth doing a little bit more.
I think I might be coming back to Silchester to see you again next year.
Well, there you are. Well, then we have to, yes. We'll do another season.
We dig for the gods that leave no bones, for the ship sailing a sunken sea. There's a loft in the sky of stones, the famine road and the merchants.
A big old city contains a wealth of archaeology, but it also presents archaeologists with lots of challenges because each generation builds on what went before, sometimes completely obscuring or at the very least confusing those layers. And because of that intensity of activity, it's very rare to find prehistoric remains under our cities, unless the archaeologists are particularly lucky. This next dig is in the most archaeologically challenging of all British cities, London, on the southern bank of the Thames in Barn Elms. London is nearly always thought of as being originally a Roman city, given that no substantial pre-Roman settlement has ever been identified close to its heart. But archaeologists have uncovered stunning new evidence that there was a large riverside settlement here during the Iron Age. In the past, tantalising clues were dredged up from the riverbed. In Victorian times, 2 battle shields and a copper helmet, dating to the Iron Age, were the star finds.
The River Thames has always thrown up a lot of finds from that period, and no one really knew where the people who were putting those things in there were living.
Jack Russell is archaeologist for London's new super sewer project. Excavations here at Barn Elms, just across the river from Fulham Football Club, recently revealed traces of that classic prehistoric dwelling, the Roundhouse. Lead archaeologist Mike Curnow has been cataloguing these intriguing discoveries.
What we've really found is quite a lot of post holes, and all of them are really quite chunky post holes. This is one of the larger ones that we've had. That, as you see, get my arm into it, is really quite deep.
Such deep, wide holes must have housed huge wooden posts, capable of supporting a massive structure.
This one we actually think is part of a roundhouse, with these 2 post holes here, and then you've got 2 post holes at the far side, which form part of a semicircle. I remember there was definitely a lot of excitement when we looked down and just saw this sort of semicircle of post holes and realised for the first time that what we had here was a roundhouse and a settlement.
The footprints of more roundhouses have since been uncovered, and there's evidence of a bustling community with a thriving ironworking industry.
This is a lump of iron slag, which indicates they were working iron on the site, melting it down and filtering out its impurities. So this is definitely a site where they're not just living, they're also working, manufacturing things, and potentially shipping them off to other places as well.
The discovery of fastenings and loom weights suggests that cloth was also woven in this centre of manufacturing, but it's one of the smallest finds that's the biggest news. These coins still have the maker's tabs that would normally have been removed, meaning an Iron Age mint could have been sighted here. Their design suggests they were made for the Cantiarchi tribe, known to be among the first users of coins in Britain, who traded with other Europeans.
The site expands our understanding of the Iron Age. It's filling in the prehistory of London, almost rewriting, if you like, this idea that there's nothing going on in London before the Romans.
These remarkable discoveries on the banks of the Thames demand a closer look. So the site's Iron Age finds specialist, Adam Sutton, has brought some of the key finds to the Digging for Britain tent.
Adam, I think so often we think about London just beginning with the Romans. Well, you are showing us that there very much were settlements there.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are among actually some of the first coins made in Britain. There is a lot of debate as to what the role of coins was in Iron Age society, whether they had a monetised economy, but it's totally possible that the fact that we've got manufacturing evidence here means that people had to come and exchange the objects which they wanted to buy for what is effectively money.
Yeah.
There's also potentially a ritual aspect. They could potentially be intended for offerings. The river is very nearby, and we know that people like to cast metal objects into the river as a ritual.
Yeah, people still throw coins into fountains
people still
today.
Throw things into wishing wells and stuff like that today. So it's a very long tradition of that sort of thing.
And here are some of the finds that have emerged from in and around those roundhouses. So what do these finds tell us?
We've got some really nice examples of decorated objects here.
Yeah, that's lovely. I love these kind of sinuous lines of dots.
We do actually have evidence that even though these pots were really nicely decorated, they were still used for cooking. And we've actually commissioned an artist to give us an artist's impression of what the settlement might have looked like.
That is fantastic. I mean, with the Thames here and this little settlement on the banks.
Absolutely.
And
it
all
looks
that
kind
activity.
of idyllic, doesn't
it does look idyllic, yeah.
So these are completely new communities to us, and they really give us an impression of life in London before London was there, which I think is really amazing.
The geology of Britain has been sculpted by ice and water, creating some epic landscapes where you can really appreciate the destructive power of water. But in fact, water can be the archaeologist's friend. It can be very difficult and challenging to dig waterlogged sites, but then you get some incredible preservation of organic remains like wood. And in fact, that preservation is best not even on land, but at the bottom of the ocean.
Our next dig takes place under that narrow strip of water that makes the Isle of Wight an island, the Solent. Many thousands of years ago, this was dry land. So for Gary Momber of the Maritime Archaeology Trust, what's on the seabed holds detailed information about how humans lived here. In 2019, we followed Gary as he lifted and reassembled a mysterious wooden walkway. Now Gary is back, hoping to find more evidence to fill in the many gaps in our understanding of the mysterious Mesolithic people.
Just the only site we've got in the UK. It's 8,000 years old, and it's telling us stuff about this period of time we know nothing about.
Mesolithic people roamed these lands as hunter-gatherers. From 9,500 BC until around 4,000 BC, when farming and crops arrived in Britain. Today, Gary's embarking on an experiment that could challenge that traditional thinking.
Okay, stand by. And go.
He's diving down to take a sediment sample, a time capsule, from an ancient Mesolithic settlement site that's known to date back around 8,000 years.
We're going to take some samples for DNA analysis. so that we get an insight into DNA from all the living sort of creatures that were around at that point 8,000 years ago.
Gary hopes to reveal what plants and animals these people gathered and hunted. As he reaches the Mesolithic site, evidence of their occupation can be seen everywhere.
It's like an old haunted landscape. It's like one of those ghost towns. The remnants of people still there with their flints lying on the seabed.
Gary hammers his sample box into an undisturbed section of seabed. The box cuts through several layers of sediment, including earth occupied by our Mesolithic ancestors. With the precious sample captured for DNA analysis, he returns to the surface.
Success. Quite a weight to carry, that. Got it. Got it. Got a cracking sample, straight from the sediment. Once we get the DNA analysis, we can really break it down to find out what the minutiae of every little species that was living on the site at the time. And we're going to find out all sorts of stuff that's going to help us reconstruct that landscape 8,000 years ago.
A month later, bioarchaeologist Kat Jarman joins up with Gary at Warwick University to get an insight into the testing process and learn the initial results.
So you have this brilliant sort of almost like a treasure, archaeological treasure chest here. What's the next step now?
Well, the process will be to get it into the lab. We'll get ourselves nice and suited up and nice and protected so that we won't be contaminating the sample ourselves.
So that way you can be absolutely sure that what you're looking at is the real 8,000-year-old Mesolithic sample.
Yeah, we just got to make sure there's no modern contamination at all.
Yeah.
Sedimentary DNA sampling is so sensitive, even the tiniest contamination could corrupt the results.
Covered, head to toe, no contamination.
Right. No contamination anywhere.
Right.
Okay,
ready?
let's better do it.
Next, Gary opens up the box of archaeological treasure.
That's it. That's a bit of the seabed,
Yeah.
8,000 years old, brought to the surface. And this is sort of the area that we're interested in.
The sample reveals the layers of terrain that have built up through time. The bottom layer of silt shows the land lived on by the Mesolithic people.
So that looks like that would have been the land surface.
Somebody walking through it would literally be walking on this.
Yes, this was it. This was the land. People were working, playing, sitting, having picnics, banter.
Well, it's absolutely remarkable.
Remains of the forest floor are still preserved.
Wow. That's amazing. So this is an 8,000-year-old
Yep,
oak leaf.
first time uncovered.
The sediment is placed into test tubes ready to undergo analysis in the DNA lab.
That's actually really incredible. Seeing that, just it's like it's an 8,000-year-old land surface being excavated from the seabed, and it's got everything. We found flints, we found twigs, a whole oak leaf, and that's the environment that somebody walked through 8,000 years ago. So the team and I are taking samples for DNA, and I just can't wait to see what that's going to reveal.
Professor Robin Allaby has been interpreting the DNA analysis from Gary's sample.
What we found is a whole array of plants, and then there's all sorts of large animals around there.
These traces were typical signs of Mesolithic occupation, but amongst them is a reading for something totally unexpected.
The really strange thing that we found, about 8,000 years ago, we get this signal for wheat.
Wheat was thought to have arrived in Britain around 6,000 years ago, but this discovery shows it could have travelled north from Europe 2,000 years earlier.
I mean, that's really spectacular, isn't it? And unexpected.
Really odd.
It's amazing, though, isn't it? That a small DNA sample like this can tell that really quite big story about how people moved across continents.
That's entirely true. There's a massive story written in the DNA of the sediments.
The combination of Gary's underwater archaeology and Robin's cutting-edge DNA analysis seems to have moved the first recorded dating for wheat back by 2,000 years, potentially a big shift in the timetable of early British agriculture.
This wheat is really quite special and quite unique. So this site really is telling a very big story from just some very exciting new technologies. And this, I think, is a really exciting one for the future.
For our last dig, we're actually returning to the story of the mysteriously located Norman church in Buckinghamshire.
The exciting thing about archaeology is that it is constantly evolving. Each new find reveals a new story, sometimes adding details, sometimes profoundly changing what we thought we knew. Now, the site of St Mary's at Stoke Mandeville has already delivered archaeological excitement in spades. When I visited a few weeks ago, there was the Norman church that we knew existed, but under that, an unknown layer of Anglo-Saxon archaeology. And then little did we know that there was also an earlier phase with some spectacular finds, making this one of the most exciting archaeological discoveries of the year, if not the decade.
And that does suggest that there is a meaningful life.
Earlier in the programme, lead archaeologists Guy and Rachel told us they'd identified a large square foundation feature they thought was from an Anglo-Saxon tower. But while excavating the circular ditch surrounding it, things get much more interesting.
The fill of the ditch is this dark brown colour, and the shape of it are these two V-shaped edges here. And you can see that there's quite a lot of rubble material in it, and it also has this kind of darker organic preserved layer here, and it's that layer that's producing a lot of our really amazing finds.
It's an astonishing breakthrough. Over 2 days of excavating, the shoulders and heads from not one but two life-size Roman busts are discovered, including one by 24-year-old Cameron.
Throughout the whole project, we've been trained to look for stones that are sculpted or worked, and there it was facing me was a person's chest carved out of stone, and everyone joked, so, well, it'd be amazing if you'd find the head. So about 5-10 minutes later, Karen digging came up and it was a woman's head, and it was just really cool to get something like that. It's just like ultra special.
The ditch has still more secrets, including a stunning glass urn, multiple pots of cremated remains, and an extraordinary headless skeleton with leg injuries that suggest a sudden violent end. It's all beyond the archaeologists' wildest expectations.
But I mean, those sculptures are, that is so rare. To find that kind of thing in an archaeological context,
Yeah.
it is like, that is
You
really,
can't even
really
say it's
rare.
once in a career. It's you would be extremely lucky if you ever found anything like that.
Yeah.
Never mind
Yeah.
2 or 3 of them.
Well, the dig has finished completely now. The big tent has come down and all the finds have come to storage facilities like this before being divided up and sent out to specialists for further analysis. So I'm really lucky to come here today when all the finds are still in one place, because these are some of the most significant discoveries from Roman Britain in years.
Rachel and Guy have gathered up their still uncleaned star finds from that extraordinary ditch for me to get a good look at.
I've been so excited to come and see these new finds.
It's wild, isn't it?
I mean, it's an astonishing haul of archaeological treasure. This is real treasure, isn't it, to
Yeah.
come out of that ditch? So does that head go with that pair of shoulders?
It does, yes, and we can put it back on top.
Go on then. I mean, that's just such a beautiful statue, isn't it?
She's really astonishing to look at.
Yeah. Her face is gorgeous.
It's so fine,
The
isn't
shaping,
it?
yeah, the shaping of the cheeks and the mouth. Presumably that hairstyle is really dateable.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we get these looked at by someone that really knows about Roman sculpture, they'll be able to tell you who they might be. And like you say, the hairstyle is incredibly dateable, so we'll get a really good date for when this thing was made. This, like, one object is going to tell you so much.
Thank you very much for putting her back together for a moment.
It's amazing to see.
Yeah.
And very unweathered, actually.
Presumably these statues were in a building of some kind?
Yeah, so it's like a building had been demolished into part of that ditch, but we didn't really have much of the building structure itself, but we have what seemed to be quite a lot of the contents. So the statues, there's cremation urns, there was a glass vessel as well.
Oh, look at that. That's beautiful.
It's an incredible object, isn't it? Look how clear the glass is.
Yeah. Are you happy for me to handle this then?
Yep. Just make sure you don't cut yourself.
Yeah, it's sharp actually, isn't it? So you think this is for a cremation as well then?
It could be.
It could be.
It could be acting like a cremation urn, effectively.
We should get that back in its water, shouldn't we, to stop it drying out? So this is one of the funerary urns. Is this definitely Roman?
Yes.
Yeah.
The pottery is Roman.
Yeah.
They've been thrown in, and that's when they've broken, and that's why it's wrapped in the bandages.
There are 8 of them, and we also have an inhumation. And that inhumation is really interesting because it's somebody who's not buried in a kind of classic way. It's someone that's more or less been rolled into the ditch, and they were buried with some coins, and the coins are actually a really key thing here. This is going to...
These are the coins here, are they?
So then we get a date for those. We're going to get a really good date for when this material was all deposited in the ditch.
Now, they're very muddy looking at the moment, and presumably, again, as with the statues, you're leaving all that cleaning for the specialists in the lab.
If we rub that mud onto the surface of the coins there, you're going to effectively erase the information that's on the face of the coin. So we want to do that with a proper conservation treatment, basically.
Yeah, because that is a key piece of information, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That tells you when this material, which presumably at that point is being considered to be rubbish, you know, it's being cleared into the ditch.
It's being kind of almost violently destroyed, I think, was probably...
Do you think?
Archaeologists don't, you know, I don't want to over-interpret, right? But I think that looks like deliberate destruction of it into this ditch.
Certainly the cremation urns have been thrown into that ditch with no care.
And then backfilled over the top with rubble.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting because then I suppose you've got the question of whether that's just expedient and you're moving it out the way before you do something new at the site, and maybe that is perhaps building an Anglo-Saxon tower, or whether this represents a set of beliefs that are no longer operating, and so you smash it up and move it out of the way.
And that's why the coins are important, because I think when we get a date for that destruction moment, we would be able to say different things about it, I think. So if it's happening in the late Roman period, then I think that has a different meaning than if it's happening in, say, the 6th or 7th century.
So at this point, there's so much work left to do on each of these different finds, and each one will reveal another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I love the fact that it's all buried together in a moment. That's so rare.
Well, please keep in touch, and I think I will definitely be coming back to see you to find out more about this story.
Well, yeah, I can't wait to find out more about this story.
None of us can.
Search for